So what's up, people, and welcome to another episode of Comics, Animations, and Movies. So in this episode, I would like to go over two of my favorite comics. They are Battle Angel Alita and Tokyo Ghoul. And in today's episode, I would like to talk about one thing that is common between the two comics. Now, if you take a look at both comics, you will wonder what I'm talking about, considering the fact that one is a horror comic and the other is science fiction. And there is very little that is similar in terms of plot. However, there is one area that I think both comics excel in, and that is the portrayal of the human spirit, the human character, or the character development. And it's because of this portrayal, I find that there's great depth and empathy to these comic series. And it's probably why I find these two comics to be two of my favorite comics. Now, like many other comic readers, I typically like to read comics for the typical mainstream reason, which is escapism. You tend to enjoy comics for getting a good feel out of reading them. You would typically find a nice hero, adventure, or, if you're lucky, you will find a good comedy or even a good drama. And by reading them, it makes you feel good. It takes you away from all the troubles in life. And overall, it's a nice form of escapism. And when it comes to Japanese-style manga comics, many of the really popular ones fall into a similar mainstream sort of formula, which many of the readers often call the shonen comics. And if you read one, then you start recognizing the typical formula, which is that it starts out with a main character who's usually somewhat naive, needing to grow, and usually has some sort of unique ability, but just can't get along in life too well. And through the adventures that they have, they continue to level up and they become stronger and wiser, and they start saving the world in many ways until at the very end they meet the end boss, and through them and their comrades, they defeat the end boss and they save the world and all is well and they live happily ever after. Sure, there are sad parts. Some people may pass away, but overall, you see this formula where they're continuously overcoming things and they get stronger and stronger and stronger, and everybody sees them as a hero. And overall, I don't mind those types of comics. I enjoy them. I mean, Naruto falls into that. Dragon Ball is probably one of the earliest of those, and One Piece is like that. Bleach is like that. And many of these comics I do enjoy. I did enjoy reading before they finished. And things like One Piece, I still continue to read. But amongst all these comics, every once in a while there comes a unique comic that doesn't follow the formula, doesn't give you the escapism, and in fact, it starts digging right into your soul and starts kind of stabbing you there. It does so by the intricate plots, but just as much also by the kind of the character development that you see in these stories. You see, these stories don't have the typical formula growth of a naive, good person who continues to become better and better, and it's because of their good soul that everybody becomes attracted to them and they become the hero, the leader, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. If anything, the characters in these comics tend to be flawed in some way. And it's because of a lot of the things that they do that a lot of tragedy and a lot of problems occur. And it's through that sort of story that these characters have to continue on. I mean, despite all the problems that go on, and despite the fact that in many ways society doesn't see them as heroes, and in fact society tends to beat them down in many ways, that you start feeling empathic towards them. You start feeling like you could relate to a lot of the problems that they have, because a lot of the problems you have kind of fall into that category. Yeah, of course, their story is a lot more extreme than many of ours, but as with everybody, we tend to say life is tough. And when you look at these people, you realize that, yeah, these guys aren't going through a formula. they're having some major problems, and you could understand these people are not the Jedi. They're not the hero white knight in shining armor. They're just trying to get through life in whatever way they can. And despite all the problems that they have, their human spirit will continuously move them on. And it's because of that that you start kind of respecting them for all they have. You start feeling empathic for them. You feel like you want to see them succeed because of the fact that it's not happening in the formula manner that you see in many of these other comics. Now, like I said, if you were to take a first short glance at either of these comics, you would come out probably thinking that, well, they may not be all that interesting. I mean, Battle Angel Alita, just from the title alone, makes you think, okay, this is another one of those battle sort of, maybe gotta catch 'em all sort of comic. And considering that it's a girl, maybe it's some sort of Sailor Moon sort of comic. Of course, if you open it up, you find that it's a very cyberpunk sort of art style, and the story is extremely violent. And the next thing you think of is, oh, this is heavy metal. This is like heavy metal comics, you know? And to some extent, you would be right. You know, a lot of the plot follows what you might think of as heavy metal cyberpunk sort of comic line. The difference, again, is with regards to the character. Here, I've read a lot of heavy metal, and there are a lot of fun stories where you get an interesting outlook in science fiction. But in this case, you really do start relating to the character. And which it's very interesting because of the fact that, of course, as you keep reading, you realize that Alita is a cyborg. And the first thing you might think of is, oh, this is going to be another artificial intelligence sort of movie. Or not movie, but comic. And in fact, people who watch the trailer for Alita Battle Angel, the first thing they're saying is, oh, this is BattleBots, or this is another AI sort of movie where people are going to talk about androids who want to be human. No, it doesn't really fall into that sort. And in the beginning, in fact, if you read the comic, you start thinking that this follows the typical shonen sort of genre because, of course, Alita wakes up in a dystopian society with all her memory gone. And as she keeps on going, she starts learning more about herself. And the first thing you may think of is that this is Born Identity meets Elysium. And in general, that may be correct as far as a general plot line is concerned. However, you know, as you keep on reading, and by the time you get to the second arc, which is often called the Hugo arc, you start realizing something is wrong. This is not going the way you want it to. This is not going the way you expect it to. And things start flipping all over the place. You know, people who watch the anime understand with regards to the Hugo arc, but people who've read the comic know way more beyond that because things get seriously twisted as you go along. And what you expect to happen doesn't, and sometimes it aggravates you to death because of the fact that you're like, why can't the main character get the credit or the respect for some of the things that she does? But you understand that to some extent society is like that. And the interesting thing is throughout this entire ordeal, you start feeling really close towards the character because of the fact that she's fighting so hard to get through life despite all the things that life does to her. Now, what's interesting is if you are not a reader of Alita Battle Angel, but if you are a reader of Tokyo Ghoul, you're probably thinking, what? This sounds exactly like Ken Kaneki's story, right? Ken Kaneki is the main character for Tokyo Ghoul. And if you, again, look at the title, you think, oh, this is another zombie apocalypse. And it isn't. It's about ghouls versus humans. And it's a horror story about man-eating ghouls that come out to fight humans and the humans who have to, you know, fight to survive against them, right? That sounds like your typical zombie apocalypse, maybe another monster story. Well, here's the twist. The main character is from the views of the ghoul. And that's an interesting story to look at. And what's interesting about this story, Tokyo Ghoul, is that the ghouls are no different than humans. They have feelings, they laugh, they enjoy, they fall in love, except that they're ghouls. Medically, they are incapable of eating any sort of food except human flesh. Oh, and coffee. For some reason, they can drink coffee. So you understand, whether they like it or not, they are forced to consume human flesh or they perish, they die. And so somewhere along the way, the ghouls try to figure out how to do so. And of course, some ghouls, just like in some world, in real life, just enjoy killing humans. And of course, that creates the horror from the human side, where the humans see the remains of the bodies that the ghouls have eaten, and they have a big panic attack. And because of that, the humans create a police society where the police, a certain special force called the CCG, are there to battle the ghouls. And it is this battle that the story takes place, and it is right in there that Ken Kaneki falls in. Now, what's interesting is Ken Kaneki used to be a human. And he starts out as a human, just like anybody else, naive human who's fearful of the ghouls, who never wanted to meet a ghoul because, boy, they're scary. But he's a high school kid trying to get along in life. Well, due to some unfortunate circumstances, he becomes a half ghoul. And you're like, oh, okay, is this like Twilight? No, it's not like Twilight, because Twilight does follow the typical shonen sort of storyline. This one keeps on going where you're like, oh my gosh, what the heck is happening to Ken Kaneki? And you start feeling this way right from the beginning when Ken becomes a ghoul, because of course now he has to consume human flesh, and of course he can't. I mean, a couple of days before he was a human, and so to him, of course, consuming human flesh would be an act of cannibalism, because he associates himself as a human more than a ghoul. And you can imagine for the next few chapters, it's just sheer torture, and it's all about that. He can't consume anything. He's trying to eat food, and of course he gets sick doing so, and it just drives him crazy. He can't even be around humans, because if he sees a little girl, he starts actually getting hungry and wants to eat her, and that drives him absolutely crazy. And it keeps on going where you start realizing, yes, this is definitely a dark rabbit hole that you're starting to go into when he starts meeting with the other characters in the story. And one of the first is, of course, this young lady named Toka, who is a ghoul. She's a high school student just like Ken. And she meets Ken during this initial few chapters, and Ken is like, you have no idea, get away from me. You have no idea what the problems I'm going through. I used to be a human, I'm now a ghoul, I can't live this way, I'm gonna die of hunger, blah, 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 blah. And it's at this time that, of course, Toka rightfully kicks him in the face. And basically comes back with the statement, you have no idea what I've had to go through my life with. And she makes a very simple statement, which I thought was extremely deep. And the thing she says is, so what does cake taste like? And it's a very simple statement, but what she's saying is, I have in my entire life never got a chance to eat cake. I've never gotten a chance to eat any of the things that humans enjoy. In fact, my life has been one complete hell. And don't come running to me with the sob story that you are now going crazy because you've become a ghoul. I've been a ghoul all my life, and you have no idea some of the problems that I had to deal with. And that's when you realize that, of course, this is going to be a story very different from what you typically expect. Right? And so, yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting thing with regards to Tokyo Ghoul. I mean, the things that go on beyond that point, it doesn't get any easier for Ken. If anything, it gets seriously, seriously dark. And of course, anybody who's read Battle Angel could seriously go, wow, this guy is almost as bad as Alita in the things that he's had to deal with. So this is the main reason why I've brought both these comics into this video, is because of this commonality with regards to the human character, the character development, and the human spirit. I mean, again, these are not perfect characters. In fact, some of the things that you read about in the comics are from the actions that do in the comics that later on cause devastating consequences. And you start realizing, like, wow, there's some reality with regards to this, because if you go back to those chapters and you read what Alita has done or what Ken has done, you will go, yeah, if I were to go through this, I would do exactly what they would do. And yet, you know that several chapters down, what they do causes some major problems later on. Literally, them having to watch many of their comrades die because of actions that they did in the past. And it's because of these sorts of things that you start feeling like there's a lot more depth, a lot more intricacy, a lot more complexity to not only the story, but also to the characters in the story. And it's because of that that, again, you start feeling empathy towards the story as well as the characters in the story. Now, there are differences. I mean, Alita Battle Angel, or Battle Angel Alita, I should say, is a lot more of a single character sort of story. As much as there are other characters that come out, and you do feel for the other characters that come out, such as Daisuke Ito or Dyson Ito in the movie, but in the very end, this story is really about Alita and her adventures as you go along. And since she's a cyborg, certain episodes that go on that you think, oh, this is only a few chapters, can span like several years between them. And so you start realizing that her story and her life goes way beyond the relationships that she may have with certain people. Whereas in the case of Tokyo Ghoul, it's all about his relationship with the people around him. And it's very interesting because you do feel for the relationships. You feel for the other people and the things that they have to go through. Some of the people that you hated, and this is the one really interesting thing about Tokyo Ghoul, some of the people you absolutely hated in the beginning, you really start to like in the end, and some of the people you really liked in the beginning, you can't stand in the end. And so it really does give you those twists and turns that you might see, often see in real life. In both these cases, one is an adventure while the other is more political, and the story is that way. Now, as far as artwork is concerned, they're both beautiful. If I were to give the artistic skill of each of these artists, I guess I would say Yukito Kishiro will go on top. His work is sometimes absolutely breathtaking, and the skills that go into the intricacies are absolutely gorgeous. Now, in Shueisha's case, what's interesting is his artwork is a lot more rough, but it's absolutely fitting of the story, because the story sometimes can get seriously dark. And when it does, my gosh, that artwork fits so well. And so I think for the genre that you have, Alita Battle Angel or Battle Angel Alita is, again, cyberpunk. And the artwork works when it's cyberpunk. Whereas Tokyo Ghoul is a horror story. And when you have a horror story, the rough, dark sort of drawings that Shueisha does just fits the, the story's feeling at that time. So I think they're both really good writers. Ishida, I would say, might be more creative. Some of his chapters are downright strange, but in a good way, right? He is the ultimate troll. And my gosh, he trolls readers. If you thought the Red Wedding made people angry, wow, there are some things in Tokyo Ghoul which just made readers absolutely rage. And that does bring it to some relationship. If you've never read either of these mangas and want to know what it's like, if any of you have watched something like Battlestar Galactica, the second series, or more recently Game of Thrones, you start understanding, stories where the good guy doesn't always win, where things that you hope will happen doesn't happen, and things get twisted around in so many different ways. You're like, what the heck is going on? And you get really angry watching the series, but at the same time, it's what keeps you locked onto the series because it gives the series depth. And that's what I feel has these two comics have over a lot of the other comics that are out there. Yeah, I enjoy One Piece. I enjoy Naruto. I enjoy Dragon Ball in their own way. I mean, One Piece has its extremely sentimental times, but there is something about Tokyo Ghoul and about Battle Angel Alita that puts it in a different light. And for that, I really thank both Yukito Kishiro for creating Battle Angel Alita and Shueisha for creating Tokyo Ghoul. They are really, really fine comics, in my opinion. Well, that's about it for this video. And for those of you who've read one of these manga, for example, Battle Angel Alita, but have not read Tokyo Ghoul or vice versa, yeah, I would suggest that you kind of take a look at the other comic. If you do like the things that at least I enjoy with regards to either of these comics, then I think you might find the other comic to be of interest as well. In any case, I will continue on with more videos if I come up with more questions with regards to either Battle Angel Alita or Tokyo Ghoul. And at that time, well, I hope you join me. In any case, thank you very much for watching the video. We'll continue on with more comics, animations, and movies in the future. And until that time, I wish you all the best. Happy comic reading, manga reading, and anime watching, and movie watching. And as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.